Alright, welcome back. In this video we're gonna use radians and degrees in order to figure out the values of sine and cosine and tangent of certain degrees. So let's write down the most fundamental degrees that we know of. 0, 30, 45, 60, and 90. That's the degrees we learned, right? Let's make a line, visible, and let's write sine of theta, and let's write cosine of theta. Now what is sine of 0 degrees? What is that? Well, you could probably use a triangle and figure it out, or you might figure it out for 30, but I'm not going to prove anything here in this video. All I'm going to do is that I'm just going to show you a quick way of memorizing these angles for your test. Alright, so let's start with 0 degrees. 0, what's sine of 0? Well, sine of 0, it's 0 degrees. It's sine of 0, it's 0. If you imagine your unit circle, it's 0. Right, so it's 0. What's sine of 30? Well, most people, they know that it's 1/2, or it's 0.5. What's sine of 45? Well, that's the square root of 2 over 2. What's sine of 60? Well, that's the square root of 3 over 2. What's sine of 90? Well, that's 1. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, am I going to remember all that? There's no way I could remember all that. However, you're safe. I'm going to show you a trick for remembering these, but first I have to write them out. What is cosine of what 0 degrees? Well, if you imagine your unit circle, if you draw it in front of you and actually check, cosine of 0 degrees is 1. Wait, 1? That's the same thing as sine of 90. Well, maybe it's a coincidence. Alright, what's cosine of 30 degrees? Well, that's the square root of 3 over 2. Wait, hold on. There's a similarity here. What's cosine of 45? Well, that's square root of 2 over 2. What's cosine of 60? Well, that's 1/2, and it's also pretty similar to 30 degrees. And cosine of 90 is 0. So as you see, if you take all these numbers and you flip them, they're going to be exactly the same as the sine. So if you take the sines and you flip them and you place them here, you're going to get the cosine values. You can see that there's a correspondence between all those numbers around the circle. I'm going to show you a quick way of remembering these numbers. There's actually a trick involved in this. Alright, so sine of 0 degrees. Right? Let's do sine of 0 degrees. Sine of 0 degrees. Sine of 0 degrees is 0. But you can also say that it's the square root of 0 over 2. Square root of 0 is 0. 0 over 2 is 0. So that's 0, as previously mentioned. Sine of 30 degrees. What's that? Sine of 30 is 1/2. Well, it's 1/2, right? But can we also say that it's the square root of 1 over 2? Well, sure. Square root of 1 is 1 over 2 is 1/2. What's the sine of 45? Well, that's the square root of 2 over 2. What is this sine of 60? Well, that's the square root of 3 over 2. What's the sine of 90? Well, hang on a second. You might be thinking that it's 1. Well, it's square root of 4 over 2. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 over 2 is 1. So think about it this way. It's 0 squared over 2. 1 squared over 2. 2 squared over 2. 3 squared over 2. 4 squared over 2. And here you have the basic angles. 0, 30, 45, 60, and 90. You get this neat way. So every time you have to memorize them, double them. What's sine of 0 degrees? Well, it's square root of 0 over 2. And you can memorize these. It's not really that hard. I mean, in general, if you simplify them, then you're basically going to get, let me show you, basically going to get 0, 1/2, square root of 2 over 2, square root of 3 over 2, and 1. So basically you have 0, 1/2, and then you have square root of 3 over 2 and 1. Then you have this square root of 2 over 2 in the middle, which is the 45 degrees. You probably memorized them. And what is that for cosine? For cosine, you might ask, it's flipped. So we start with square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, the square root of 2 over 2. Notice that the square root of 2 over 2 for 45 degrees and for cosine, they're exactly the same. So sine of 45 and cosine of 45, they're exactly the same. And here we're going to get square root of 3 over 2 and square root of 4 over 2. So basically it's the same thing here. If you memorize these, you've actually come a very long way. What's tangent? What is tangent? Well, you might not know this, but there's a trigonometric identity. Tangent of theta is the same thing as sine of theta divided by cosine of theta. Right? I am hoping that you know this. So let's find tangent of 30 degrees. Tangent of 30 degrees. Well, we know that sine of 30, or sine of pi over 6, is 1/2, and cosine of 30 is equal to square root of 3 over 2. So basically, tangent of 30 degrees is equal to 1/2, right? That's the sine, and then square root of 3 over 2, right? The half comes from here. This goes in here. So this is the same thing as sine, which is this, divided by cosine. Alright, so if we flip this fraction the other way and we multiply them, there is like dividing fractions. You're going to get 1/2 multiplied by 2 over the square root of 3. The 2's cancel and you're going to get 1 over the square root of 3, which is not really nice. So if you multiply both sides by the square root of 3, you're going to get the square root of 3 over 3. And this is tangent of 30 degrees. Now you can do this pretty much for all angles from 0 to 90 if you wished, but you're going to encounter a problem with tangent when it comes to 90 degrees, and I'll show you why later. Let's do tangent of 0. Tangent of 0 degrees, right? That's sine of 0 divided by cosine of 0. Well, we know that sine of 0 is 0. We know that cosine of 0 is 1. So it's going to be sine over cosine, so it's going to be tangent of theta, or of 0, I'm sorry, is 0 over 1, which is 0. However, when it comes to 90 degrees, tangent of 90 degrees, what is that? That's a really good question. Tangent of 90 degrees, that's the same thing as sine of 90 degrees divided by cosine of 90 degrees. So it's going to be sine of 90. That's 0. That's 1. Cosine of 90 degrees. That's 0. So tangent of 90 degrees. That's 1 over 0. Now you can't divide by 0 in mathematics. This is an error. Doesn't work. So that's basically a tangent. And we can also figure out what tangent of 45 degrees is. And remember, when I'm doing this, I have memorized what sine of 45 degrees is and what sine of 60 degrees is. And I encourage you to do the same thing because it's going to make your life so much easier. Alright, so tangent of 45. Or let's do radians. What's 45 in radians? Well, that's pi over 4. Tangent of pi over 4. If you put your calculator in the radian mode and you plug in pi over 4, then you're going to get same answer. Alright, sine of 45 degrees divided by cosine of 45 degrees. Alright, what's sine of 45? Well, excuse me. Alright, sine of 45. Square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. Square root of 2 over 2. Cosine of 45 degrees is square root of 2 over 2. Why? Because we start off here. Square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. So basically you're going to get square root of 2 over 2 divided by square root of 2 over 2. So tangent of pi over 4, which is the same thing as tangent of 45, it's the same thing as square root of 2 over 2 divided by square root of 2 over 2. Now what happens when you divide a number by itself? You get 1. Or if you want to see a clear arithmetic, you can do square root of 2 over 2 and then times 2 divided by square root of 2. These cancel out and you get 1. Well, you get 1 degrees. I mean, not 1 degrees, but the value is 1. So that's how tangent works. And I don't think we've done 60 degrees yet. So I encourage you to do 60 degrees and find out what that tangent of 60 degrees is by yourself. And I'll leave that as an exercise for you. In the next section, we'll actually use the trigonometric, unit circle in order to figure out all the degrees of sine and cosine. So we're going to find out what sine of 225 degrees is, what sine is of 210 degrees, what sine of 120 degrees is. And we're going to do this by using what we learned in the previous sections, and it's going to be much easier than it looks.